Welcome back. We're having a very nuanced discussion on the telco sector. It's a continuing series of this discussion. We've had a couple of it before, and as always, it's nuanced. We're talking club effect, we're talking infrastructure sharing, and to help us share that is Maureen, who's an equity analyst at African Alliance Securities. Maureen, good afternoon and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Maureen, obviously you spend a lot of time analyzing the industry, the competitive sector of the industry. Mm-hmm. You've also had an opportunity to look at the Competition Authority memo that they sent to Parliament last year. Mm-hmm. Well, the one I have is dated August 2018. I don't know if that's a correct version date. But they raise a number of issues in the advice. It's more of an advisory opinion. Mm-hmm. The first advisory, they're saying that the market is actually very competitive, and they produce a very nice graph of Safaricom share in voice, data, and mobile money market. And they conclude that the market is actually very competitive. Safaricom does not have significant market power in those three markets. Mm-hmm. Consequently, they're calling in their view, the market does not need ex-ante regulations. I mean, you've gone through the report. What's your view? You've formed some view on it?
Yes, I think there's some validity towards the recommendations that are given. Yeah. If we look at the major service segments that telco, that's the voice, data, and SMS. And if you look at that in terms of the market share that Safaricom has, so that has been coming down. Yeah. So what creates sort of like the split, or rather the split of opinion, comes into mobile money. So what mobile money has done, or rather what M-Pesa has done, is sort of create stickiness, customer stickiness. Yeah. And when you look at that from that perspective, then it's very hard for a customer to switch from Safaricom to another provider. And I think that's what's causing the sort of
Talking of stickiness, there's a bill in Parliament.
Yes.
Please tell us your views on this.
Please. What do you think? Do you think there's better value in spinning off those platforms?
And for who?
Sorry?
No, better value
and for who? Is the consumer or the shareholders? Yes.
I think in the future it will be sort of inevitable for a split to be, or for a split to happen. Yeah. Because if we look at the revenue contribution from M-Pesa itself, that has been growing quite massively. Yeah. I think it's almost around 30% now. Yeah,
which is quite significant.
Yeah, which is quite significant for an individual business, which M-Pesa is not ideally the core business for a telco provider, or So I think in the long run it will be inevitable if we are going at this pace. So the benefit to, I think for consumers there could be some benefit in terms of now M-Pesa operating as without the backing, without the backing of Safaricom. Yeah. Maybe it will have to look at the rates that they're offering. And
it essentially becomes a platform.
Exactly, it becomes a platform.
Okay, when you say that the telco is actually deriving value from what is in an ideal world not supposed to be its core business.
Yes.
How much is M-Pesa as a percentage of the total revenue?
It would be about 30%.
About 30%. Yeah. So then what happens if you're saying this split is inevitable? What happens when this happens? Do we say that, for one, the revenue, the top line reduces automatically by a third? Or how do we look at it?
We can look at it, once, let's say, the split occurs in such a scenario. Okay. So Safaricom is left with voice, it's left with data, it's left with SMS, also there's a fixed business. If we look at that, those will be the core sort of revenue drivers for the operator. Okay. But if you look at the trend of voice and SMS, of course, that has been plateauing over the past few years, given the rise in over the top platforms. Okay. So the next space for telcos is definitely data, which is going to come into play. And we're seeing how that is rapidly growing in terms of innovations of data. When you look at the spectrum, the speed of data, so currently we're on 4G, some countries are in 5G. All right. And then there's also the Internet of Things coming into play. So I think these are sort of the business segments that could be, could drive an operator's revenue going forward.
And if I was to go back to the element of regulation, do you have a sense of when this inevitable happens? And I'm asking that in this regard. When you say there are emerging opportunities in terms of Internet of Things and OTT, do this grow as fast over the next 5 years to quickly replicate the potential risk of revenue erosion from losing on M-Pesa?
I've got to interrupt, which is, I'm very, very sorry, but you know why we're interrupting.
Yes.
It's a market close.
Market close.
Closing bell.
Let's go for the bell.
The bell, please. And welcome back. Some breaking news. Kenya has offered South Sudan 10 acres of land in Naivasha to construct a dry port. Well, this comes a few months after Kenya offered a similar quantum of land to Uganda to construct a dry port. Essentially, Naivasha is going to be an huge economic zone if all these things come into fruition. But that aside, we were discussing telco in a very nuanced way, and be there. You were on, the show was yours before I grabbed it.
Thank you, George. So we're just touching on regulation. So Maureen had just said that she thinks that the split is inevitable, and you've given us an overview and said M-Pesa is about a third, 30%, slightly below a third, 30% of total revenues. Then you also just told us that the opportunities that are emergent to the telcos and Safaricom in particular include over-the-top platforms as well as Internet of Things. Right. I wanted to get your view. If this split happens, when do you think it happens? Is it in the medium term? Is it in the long term? How quickly can these new business lines help Safaricom move and just recover this potential loss of 30%?
Yeah, essentially, how does Safaricom, a company like Safaricom, replace Safaricom? Is it replace M-Pesa? Sorry, replace M-Pesa, yes.
Right. So I think it will now sort of depend on the penetration numbers that we're looking at. Talking about internet penetration, data penetration, and what have you. Currently in Kenya, we're standing maybe at around 60%, I would say roughly.
Okay.
So it means that there's still opportunity for that sort of area to grow. Again, if you look at it, internet penetration, of course, it's dependent on the capex or the infrastructure that operators are putting out. It's also dependent on the affordability of smartphones.
Okay.
Yeah, and also again, this, as I mentioned, the over-the-top platforms increasing, and people doing more communication for businesses via that.
Okay.
So I think it will depend on data penetration, how fast that grows. Do I think it will sort of replace what M-Pesa has done?
Yes.
No, I don't think so.
Wow.
Yeah, because I think for telcos, if you look at the, let's say, trajectory going forward, data penetration will come, to sort of like a plateau level.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I think.
So how do you adjust your DCF models to that?
Sorry?
I'm sure how do you adjust your DCF models? To account for that split, I mean, you have to apply some 30% discount? I mean, DCF is full of assumptions.
Yeah.
Scenario one,
scenario one,
three.
Key assumptions.
Exactly. Yeah, I think you could apply a discount definitely. But again, you also need to look at the M-Pesa business in terms of the EBITDA margins it's generating.
Yeah.
Because, for any mobile money business, the EBITDA margins usually tend to be low because it's a scale business. I would say, of course, M-Pesa right now is winning on that space because of the scale of customers that they have. So I'd say 30% discount could be quite high, maybe something lower.
Yeah, I'm being punitive.
Okay. You've been very punitive. Then maybe we can ask in a different way. So we have seen Safaricom close at, I think about 28.10 or 0.2, 28 shillings thereabout. Is there more value? Is there more upside from 28? Based on the risks that you have identified.
Okay. So in my view, currently, we think Safaricom is a bit overvalued.
Okay.
Yeah, we have a target price of around 26.7,
all right,
the current share price.
Okay.
But of course, Safaricom never follows analysts' recommendation in terms of the share price fluctuations.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think one of the factors, of course, it's the liquidity in the market, most traded stock.
All right, demand and supply.
Yeah, demand and supply. So that always sort of causes a deviation from its fair value.
The demand and supply is outwitting the analytical mind.
Yes.
Let me ask my final question with regards to regulation. So we have all talked about and are aware of the passing away of Mr. Bob Collymore. Very sad indeed, and we pass our condolences and comfort to his family and colleagues. However, when he was extended, his role was extended in May for 1 year, and the conversation around that extension was to say they needed some stability with regards to the ongoing conversation on regulation as well as the operating environment. When I look at the operating environment, internally, Safaricom is well structured.
Right.
When I look at the external environment, anything can happen. When you look at the absence of the person who was championing this conversation, what do we see? Are there any other risks that could come out with regards to regulation and possibly erode the value at 27 and say the stock is worth 20?
Well, I think, aside from regulation, as you've mentioned, being a key risk to Safaricom, in terms of continuity of the business and where the company sort of stands, I think that will hold as it was previously.
Wow. All right.
I think Safaricom will also, sort of be able to attract the proper or the right talent to take up that role.
All right.
And the business model has been quite solid for the past several years. So I don't think that would change.
You don't think? Okay. Do you see anybody coming in from the inside? Okay, maybe our conversation for another day.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that, Maureen.
Okay.
Thank you.
But we have a profitable moment right there from our conversation.
Yes.
Safaricom is overvalued. Sell your stocks. It's overvalued.
As always, we will never agree on this.
It's African Alliance is saying Safaricom is overvalued.
African Alliance is saying, and we say that buy that stock.
Placing my order.
Touch points. But
Sell.
That's fair enough. Sell it.
Maureen, we're getting back to the sector as a whole. I mean, the report, which you also spent some time to look at, discusses some of the key issues. One is infrastructure sharing, and also the club effect, which I have an issue with. Obviously, telco is the only sector where the regulator can intervene, both on the wholesale market and the retail market. On the retail side, obviously, infrastructure sharing. On the wholesale side and the infrastructure sharing side, there are things like spectrum sharing, mast sharing. They also have the universal fund that sets up some subsidized masts.
Yes.
What's your idea of infrastructure sharing, both on the retail and wholesale side? Do you think that we have things like merchant interoperability? Do you think that that's enough?
I think that the issue of infrastructure sharing is, I would say it's quite straightforward. I mean, not quite straightforward, because on one hand, you're looking at, let's say in Safaricom's case, a company that has invested X amount of capital over the past, to put up its towers, to put up its base stations. And the rationale for doing this is obviously to attract subscribers. So that's their capex, and they're recouping from their investment, so to speak. But then again, on the other hand, we're looking at smaller operators which have been struggling in the past several years. So one of the recommendations that the Communications Authority had put forward through the report was that the infrastructure sharing should be sort of confined to rural areas. So they had identified 7 areas that Safaricom should, open up its network. So that's one of the recommendations that they put forward.
On a commercial basis.
On a commercial basis. But again, of course, the regulator has to come in and see.
So you can charge X amount.
Exactly.
You can only charge up to this far.
Right. And Safaricom is looking at, we invested this. This is the return that we want.
And the club effect. I mean, Safaricom has launched, what do you call it? Reverse call. But you can only call Safaricom.
Exactly.
You think such kind of things, on net promotions, you have X amount of free airtime, you can only call Safaricom. Do you think those things entrench club effect?
They definitely do. They definitely.
My view is that the regulator should stop approving such products. What do you think?
That I agree with you.
Yeah, that's what they had recommended. On on net discounts, loyalty programs, and all these things. In that, an operator has to sort of, inform the regulator on the promotion that they're about to sort of roll out. And if the competitors can replicate it.
Yeah.
So profitably,
yes,
exactly.
Yeah.
And you know, it causes an issue of you know, for Safaricom's case, how fast can they roll out products in order to retain their customers? Again, I think it just causes a club effect, definitely, as you said, for for you know, people on Safaricom network. So it becomes really hard for them to switch. I mean, if I can't reverse call someone in Airtel, let me just get my Safaricom line.
Okay.
And switching cost in Kenya very high.
On this club effect, let me throw a spanner in the works. We had this conversation earlier with George during the day, and he asked me, who's the CEO of Airtel? And I told him I don't know. And you know, we were just remembering the life of Mr. Bob Collymore and saying we would see him on the streets. He was mtu wa watu. So we knew him. So
he localized himself.
He wasn't only just selling a product, he was identifying with the consumer.
Right.
Yeah.
So when you think, you start to talk about the club effect, it has materialized as a consequence of Safaricom going through the painstaking process of understanding its consumer, bringing its consumer to its platform, and constantly listening to it. So when we discuss here the club effect and we say the regulator needs to open up that club, and we just put simply, maybe do you know who the CEO of Airtel is?
Yeah,
who's
the summer.
Okay, is it because of your work?
Yes.
Or
definitely.
It's because of your work. But the thing is, I don't believe in a market where the regulator penalizes you for doing what you needed to have done. Because if we cannot be able to name even CEO of Telcom, I mean, not that we don't know them, we know them, but then they're not names that you hear every day.
Right.
But you see, Safaricom has understood the brand, understands its customer, reaches out to the customer, and I feel, okay, maybe listening is another conversation.
Net promoter scores are what, like over 80%?
Exactly.
It's quite, the brand penetration is quite high.
It's quite high.
But let's settle this argument. Maureen, do you think club effect is an entry to barrier?
Definitely.
Sorry, barrier to entry, sorry.
Definitely.
It is.
It is.
So there you have it. It's an entry barrier. That means the regulator has a duty to lower entry barrier.
I don't agree with that, George.
What benefit would it be?
Before you take me to an entry barrier, because you have to understand, where did Safaricom, because Safaricom, when it started, Airtel had more consumers. So you cannot say all of a sudden it created a club and decided to only special people could join. It understood its market and it went ahead.
Yeah.
So if you were to tell me the regulator has concerns on consumer protection, I don't have the option of receiving or not receiving reverse calls. I have to press 1. I don't want that, for instance. If I don't want you to give me a reverse call, then I should be asked, do you want a reverse call or not? I don't need to receive a call to know whether it's a reverse call or not. If you actually told me that the consumer would be doing that, or all this, what do you call it, packages that you have for a month, and people will complain like, I bought this number of bundles and I didn't get them, but then I don't have a point of recourse. If you're to tell me that the regulator is saying because of this club effect, the number one telecom provider, Safaricom, is abusing its dominance, then this is what they need to do because of the consumer. That I understand. But telling me that there's a club effect and you need to break it down for another entrant to come into the market, that for me doesn't make any commercial sense to me.
Club effect. That's a key word. When is the last? Have you received your first reverse call, by the way?
Yes.
Oh, how was it?
I don't want to receive the reverse call. So if I'm paying for this reverse call, I don't want to be asked at that point because I didn't consume it. I didn't ask for it.
You press 1.
I know it's pressing 1, but think about it. When you're going to buy coffee, you decide I want to go buy coffee. So you wake up and go buy coffee and you know it at this price. But what they're doing is now they're demanding that I consume the coffee that I didn't order for and that I do not want. But then they're telling me you have the option of press 1 to decline. Decline the offer of coffee. So if you told me the regulator was there saying why can't Bithe get the option of not even having to deal with this at the interim, I don't want a reverse call. Why should I deal with it? You know, because when somebody calls, I pick, and then you're seeing all this, you're like, hey.
You foot the bill.
So what we need to be saying, in as much as it's club effect, we need to bring in the element of, is the consumer protected?
Consumer is not protected. But let's talk about MTR.
That's true. The
other operators are pushing for MTR 0. MTR 0.
MTR 0, wow.
To the floor.
Yes.
Just bring it all down.
Bring it all down. Already in Kenya, we have one of the lowest MTR regimes in Sub-Saharan Africa, and they want to push it further low. What's your view on NMTR 0? Do you think it's something is feasible?
I think it could be feasible, but I think it would not generate sort of the impact that
they think it can.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because again, when we look at the club effect and when you look at where a lot of the voice traffic in the industry is occurring at Safaricom. Yeah. So if an operator is calling from Airtel to Safaricom, of course now Airtel has to pay Safaricom for terminating that call.
Yeah.
Okay.
So reducing that, of course, it gives the small operators room in terms of the interconnection costs that they have to pay, let's say now to Safaricom, and they can be able now to sort of save some of that cost and maybe price other services more favorably.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. I'll give you some statistics. Last year, the other operators paid about $26 million.
Yeah.
Wow.
That is 2.6 billion shillings.
To Safaricom.
Yeah.
Interconnection fees.
Do
you think they would do essentially if they're pushing for MTR 0, then they want to keep this $26 million.
Exactly.
You think it could do some boost for their balance sheets?
It could.
Yeah, it could.
Yeah, because that's of course revenue saving.
Yeah.
And you can now be able to have more flexibility in terms of pricing of your other services.
Yeah.
But then again, we look at even the pricing that's already existing now.
No, it's already on the floor.
Yeah,
but
for the other operators.
Yes, I mean, Maureen, this is a price-sensitive market.
Yeah.
You agree with that, right? Do you think price should be a strategy for anyone?
No, I don't think it works out in the long run.
It doesn't work out.
Yeah, I think for initial entry, it does boost people. I mean, it does bring in customers.
Yeah.
But in terms of the long run, in terms of the
creating
cost,
some stickiness.
exactly,
It's not there.
It's not gonna.
I didn't move because my call rates have been adjusted.
Yeah.
Would you move?
No.
On this MTRs, you bring out a very interesting point. They paid $26 million. That's almost 10%, give or take, of Safaricom's revenue.
Yeah.
So it's about 10%.
It's about 10%. If MTRs then are pushed to zero.
Actually, it's actually 1%.
Is it 1%?
Yeah, 1%.
Yeah,
it's not there.
Okay,
It's a
that's what I was,
problem.
okay.
Yeah.
So
It's
you're
problem.
actually right. When you
It's
convert it
problem.
to shillings, that's
Yes.
what I was thinking. 10% is a lot, but 1% it's immaterial. So then I have no question. on
Yeah.
that.
Sorry to cut you short. It's just 1%.
It's just 1%.
It doesn't mean anything. But I think for the small operators, $26 million is a big deal for
them.
For them, it's a big deal,
It's a
and
big
that's
deal
why
for
they're
them.
pushing.
I mean, that's why they're pushing for it. But do you think the regulator would take some of these suggestions?
Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
I think.
definitely.
Yeah, I think
But
even if you compare to Tanzania, implemented the same in 2018. So they had.
They brought down the MTR region.
Yeah, on a glide path. So every year it would go around. The MTR would be cut by around maybe 30% up to 2022.
Every year.
Yeah.
Every
Okay.
year.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah, it's very crazy.
So we've got to have. Oh wow,
So
that's
it's worse than where we are at.
Exactly. Yeah.
What are some of the failings of these other small operators? We talk about Safaricom.
Yeah.
In your sense, you spend so much time analyzing the sector. What are some of the failings you've seen from the other side?
I think we have to look back from history in terms of one, as she had mentioned, the branding, the marketing, bringing customers into their network.
Yeah.
Also looking at the capex in terms of how much market share they control in terms of infrastructure. So Safaricom did have that first mover advantage when it comes to attracting subscribers. And again, innovation came in. Through M-Pesa. So that has also been able to create stickiness for the consumer. So it's really hard for the other operators to sort of penetrate this market where consumers don't want to move, even if you're offering 1 shilling voice, or even if
you say you can call for 1 shilling.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cross network, call it 1 shilling.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So even if that occurs, we also operate in a multi-SIM environment.
Yeah.
So most people have 2 phones.
Yeah.
And they still have to retain the Safaricom line because of M-Pesa.
Actually, multi-SIM was cited as a big constraint to the porting. The porting failed because when they introduced porting, already people had multiple SIM card phones.
So then it
doesn't
make sense.
And then if you look at porting, there's so many constraints porting. One of them is you have to pay 200 shillings charge. You have to wait 72 hours for your... Can you imagine being offline for 72 hours? It's sick, right?
No, no. That's
you just imagine that someone saying, that's unacceptable. Yeah,
those are some of the things that I say that the regulator also needs to look at the element of consumer protection, because at times they end up chasing you know, you want to split it, you're chasing the big things, but then you're forgetting that it's the consumer that pays for all of this.
Exactly.
But the data market has proved to be price elastic. It responds to price.
Yes.
Do you think this is something that the other operators could actually zero in on and try to claw back? Because obviously they constantly engage on the subscription, trying to claw back some subscribers from the big player, but they don't seem to get it. I mean, do you think they could actually focus on the data market because it's a price elastic segment?
No, I think for data that I don't think regulator can intervene as much, apart from now infrastructure sharing, of course.
Yeah.
Okay.
But in terms of pricing, it's a very competitive market already as it is.
As it is.
And if you look even at Safaricom's market share over the years, in terms of data subscribers, that has gone down maybe from around 75 to around maybe 60, 65% right now.
That's a huge
battleground for them.
Yeah.
And especially with the Safaricom now doing FTTH,
yes,
the last mile connectivity, we've also seen a lot of players coming in that space. But in terms of niche, I mean, my point is, can there be niche players
in FTTH?
Yes, this
or
is
just
just say that, just give up the voice business. Say, okay, fine, we give up the fight on voice.
Yes.
Let's be niche. We'll give you that at the cheapest price, fast internet. I'll give you 10 Mbps at 1,500 shillings a month. I definitely will call them. You think that's a segment they can specialize in the niche?
I think they can. They can because of it. Again, as we said, it's dependent on pricing.
Yeah.
But I think that the issue for maybe most of these operators will be, one, in terms of spectrum, if they're able to acquire the spectrum that's required.
Yeah.
And we know, of course, spectrum is quite expensive. So for the smaller operators, you're being told to pay around 2.5 billion for initial fees, and then there's also an annual fee, and then there's a sort of requirement for the number of stations that you have to put out in X amount of years. So there are those conditions that come into play, which can drag the pace at which you can grow your market share.
Okay.
Maureen.
Sorry, let's go ahead.
All right, now I was going to just stick onto the fiber to the home. So that's data as a component of the total revenue. How do you look at data and Masoko in your models over the next maybe 3 years? Does it get to a material sum?
For data, yes. For Masoko, we don't see any upside there so far.
So what is data today?
Data, I think, should be around 15%.
And where does that go to in about 3 years?
Maybe 20%.
20%.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm beginning to actually agree with you when you say 27%, it's more or less fairly valid, because we're saying that a third of the business, there's a risk associated with a third of the business. The probability could either be 5%, 10%, 60%. It depends on moving factors that are outside of the company.
Exactly.
Then we are saying that voice, which is almost, is it 30% or 35%? It's a mature market, so you can't expect any uplift or much uplift there. So you're saying this emergent opportunities, data being one of them, they're at 14%. You're coming off a low base. It'll take you some time to ramp up.
Exactly.
Even over the top and Internet of Things. So unless something spectacular happens, outside of demand and supply, then 27 needs to be your stopgap. Needs to be at 27. I'm either holding the stock or I'm not buying anymore.
Exactly.
Unless something material happens on the technical.
Maureen, what's the last note of Safaricom? Are you hold, buy, sell?
Sorry.
On your last note of Safaricom.
Oh, it was reduce, which is
reduce exposure.
Reduce exposure.
Fully valued.
Yeah.
Fully valued.
Okay. My last question to you, Maureen, is spectrum allocation. They've raised an issue with spectrum allocation. It's opaque. Nobody understands it. How do they do it over there?
The DG understands it.
They actually call for more transparent system mechanism of spectrum allocation.
Then how do you up the price?
So I think that, for spectrum, there's been a lot of, there's no transparency, first of all, in the allocation. Also, there's no transparency, or there's no sort of I'd say like a blanket requirement for all the operators. So let's say if Safaricom is buying 4G, they're required to, let's say, put 100 base stations in the next 3 years. Maybe another operator, same spectrum, but the requirement will be lower in terms of the expansion that they're required to do. So I think for spectrum allocation, it's been a very sort of I mean, the market has been quite, lacks transparency in a way. And I think that's one of the issues that even was raised when the operators faced the ICT committee, the questioning. Most of them were complaining that there's lack of transparency that's currently existing in the market.
Okay, great. Maureen, it's been nice having you. Such an exhaustive conversation on the telco sector. But we've got to summarize now. What's your final parting shot on telecom sectors as someone who kind of spends his day look at the telecom sector? Do you have any final parting shot? Should we buy more Safaricom, sell more Safaricom? Should you have more listings? Something like that, to that effect?
I think more listings would be good in terms of comparison. We see where the other operators are.
You're tired of covering one stop?
Yeah.
And be there, what's your? I know you're bullish on Safaricom. It's
fully valued now. Let me tell you, you have to have a good balance between the fundamentals and the technical. Because in the morning we had a conversation and we were saying the element of the shuffling up of names on the MSCI index. We're actually seeing an increased inflow that's coming to the NSC. More inflow is actually coming into Nairobi vis-a-vis Nigeria, and those are the top markets when you're looking at sub-Saharan Africa. When that money comes into Nairobi, it looks at Safaricom, it looks at Equity, KCB, and EABL. Safaricom, of the four, has the greatest growth potential in terms of earnings and in terms of dividend payout. So at times you have to balance. Yes, at 27 it's fully valued, but then will you miss out on opportunity? Because again, markets are driven by demand and supply, and on that, you know where I stand. I'm a buyer of Safaricom.
It's been great having you. Very enriched, richful discussion. African Airlines, Safaricom is fully valued. Time to sell. Mbide is bullish on Safaricom. Spectrum allocations, more transparency. Lots and lots of these discussions to look forward to in subsequent Market Today's show. It was nice having you. Have a good afternoon. Up next is Market Close Statistics.